There is a kind of sacrifice that doesn't come with applause, recognition, or even acknowledgement. It's the quiet, daily surrender that parents make for their children, often without anyone noticing. It begins the moment a child is born, when sleep becomes a luxury, personal dreams are shelved, and the parent's identity starts to dissolve into roles: caregiver, provider, protector, and guide. And while the world celebrates milestones like birthdays, graduations, and promotions, it rarely pauses to honor the person who made those moments possible, the parent who gave up their own milestones so their child could reach theirs. This chapter explores the invisible cost of parenting, the missed opportunities, the abandoned ambitions, the health ignored, and the emotional exhaustion that builds over years of putting someone else first. And when children grow up and forget these sacrifices, when they treat their parents as ordinary or dismiss their struggles as just part of parenting, the pain is not just emotional, it's existential, because the parent begins to wonder if their life mattered beyond service. And when parents forgive this forgetfulness, telling themselves, "It's okay, I did it out of love," they unknowingly allow their own story to be erased, their sacrifices to be devalued, and their worth to be measured only by what they gave, not who they are. But sacrifice without recognition is not noble, it's dangerous, because it teaches the next generation that love means disappearing, that care means self-erasure, and that parenting is a role without reward. In old age, when the body is tired and the heart longs for validation, the absence of gratitude becomes louder than any praise. It echoes in every ignored memory, every forgotten effort, and every moment the parent wishes someone would simply say, "I see what you gave up for me." And no parent deserves to feel invisible in their own legacy, to feel like their life was a series of tasks. Rather than a journey of love, growth, and humanity, you must teach your children that sacrifice is not weakness, it's strength, that giving up dreams is not expected, it's honored, and that every moment you chose them over yourself was a moment worth remembering. If your child ever forgets what you gave up, if they dismiss your struggles, or if they treat your life as background noise to their own success, that behavior must be addressed, not excused, because every time you forgive it, without recognition, you lose a piece of your story, and in old age, your story is the only thing that keeps your spirit alive. This chapter is a tribute to every parent who gave up more than they ever said, who carried burdens silently, and who still showed up with love even when they were breaking inside. It's a call to reclaim your narrative, to demand acknowledgement, and to understand that your sacrifices are not just part of parenting, they are the foundation of your legacy, and that legacy deserves to be honored with truth, depth, and gratitude. There is a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It whispers through daily routines, through the quiet indignity of being treated like a servant in your own home. For many parents, especially in old age, love is replaced by expectation, and care is replaced by command. They are no longer seen as individuals with emotions, wisdom, and dignity, but as tools for convenience, as hands to cook, clean, babysit, and serve without question. This chapter explores the heartbreaking reality of being used by your own children, not out of necessity, but out of entitlement. It begins when a parent is asked to do something just this once, and then again and again, until it becomes routine, until their presence is valued only for what they provide, not for who they are. And while the child may not see it as cruelty, the parent feels it deeply: the absence of gratitude, the lack of warmth, the coldness of being needed but not cherished. And when parents forgive this behavior, telling themselves, "I'm just helping," or "this is my duty," they unknowingly allow their role to be reduced to function, not love. But love without respect is not love, it's exploitation. And when children begin to see their parents as permanent helpers, they strip away the dignity that comes with age, with experience, and with sacrifice. In old age, when your body slows down and your energy fades, being treated like a servant becomes more than exhausting. It becomes humiliating, because it tells you that your worth is tied to your usefulness, and once that usefulness ends, so does your value, and no parent deserves to feel like a burden, like a background worker, or like a silent machine in a house they built with love. You must teach your children that help is not obligation, it's choice, that support is not automatic, it's earned, and that your presence is not a service, it's a gift. If your child ever treats you like a servant, asking without thanking, expecting without appreciating, or commanding without compassion, that behavior must be confronted, not excused, because every time you forgive it without change, you lose a piece of your dignity, and in old age, dignity is the armor that protects your soul. This chapter is a voice for every parent who has cooked meals without acknowledgement, cleaned messes without thanks, and cared for grandchildren without rest. It's a call to reclaim your humanity, to demand respect, and to understand that being loved means being honored, not used, because if you don't speak up today, tomorrow you may find yourself invisible in your own home, valued only for what you do, not for who you are, and the humiliation of that reality will be deeper than any wound, because it will be inflicted not by strangers, but by the very children you raised with love. So never forgive being treated like a servant, not for peace, not for pride, and not for family harmony. Because your life is not a service, it is a legacy, and that legacy must be protected with unwavering strength. There is a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being surrounded by people who no longer see you, hear you, or feel you. For many parents, especially in old age, this is the most painful kind of isolation, the kind that exists inside a full house, where voices echo but none speak to you, where footsteps pass but none pause for you, and where love is present in theory but absent in practice. This chapter explores the silent suffering of parents who live with their children yet feel emotionally abandoned, who cook meals that no one compliments, who sit in rooms where conversations happen around them but never with them, and who slowly fade into the background of the very lives they helped build. And when parents forgive this emotional neglect, telling themselves, at least they're here, or they're just busy, they unknowingly accept a role of invisibility, a role where their presence is taken for granted, their emotions are dismissed, and their need for connection is ignored. But presence without engagement is not love, it's absence disguised as proximity. And when children stop asking questions, stop sharing stories, and stop showing affection, they turn their parents into shadows in their own homes. In old age, when your world shrinks and your heart longs for warmth, the absence of emotional connection becomes louder than any silence. It screams in every ignored glance, every rushed conversation, and every moment you wish someone would simply sit beside you and ask, "How are you really?" And no parent deserves to feel like a ghost in their own family, like a relic of the past rather than a part of the present, or like a burden whose emotions are too inconvenient to acknowledge. You must teach your children that love is not just being under the same roof, it's being present in each other's hearts, that connection is not automatic, it's intentional, and that emotional engagement is not optional, it's essential. If your child ever makes you feel invisible, by ignoring your words, by excluding you from decisions, or by treating your presence as background noise, that behavior must be confronted, not excused, because every time you forgive it without change, you lose a piece of your emotional vitality, and in old age, vitality is the thread that keeps your spirit alive. This chapter is a voice for every parent who has smiled through loneliness, who has stayed silent to keep peace, and who has wondered if they still matter in the lives they once centered. It's a call to reclaim your emotional space, to demand connection, and to understand that being loved means being seen, heard, and valued, not just in words, but in actions, in time, and in presence. Because if you don't speak up today, tomorrow you may find yourself surrounded by people who don't know your story, who don't feel your pain, and who don't recognize your worth, and the humiliation of that reality will be deeper than any wound, because it will be inflicted not by strangers, but by the very children you raised with love. So never forgive emotional abandonment, not for peace, not for pride, and not for comfort, because your heart is not a room to be passed through, it is a home that deserves to be lived in with love. There is a kind of respect that feels hollow, not because it's absent, but because it's conditional, given only when convenient, when needed, or when appearances demand it. For many parents, especially in old age, this kind of respect is more painful than outright disrespect, because it masquerades as love while quietly eroding dignity. This chapter explores the emotional toll of being respected only when it benefits the child. When parents are praised in public but ignored in private, when their opinions are heard only when they align with the child's desires, and when their value is measured by what they can still offer, not by who they are, and when parents forgive this behavior, telling themselves, at least they're polite, or they don't mean harm, they unknowingly accept a version of love that is transactional, not unconditional, but respect that depends on usefulness is not respect. It's manipulation. And when children learn that they can switch it on and off based on mood, need, or social setting, they begin to treat their parents like props in their own narrative, not as people with independent worth. In old age, when your strength fades and your dependence grows, conditional respect becomes more dangerous. It can silence you, isolate you, and make you question your own value. And no parent deserves to feel like their dignity is negotiable, like their voice is valid only when it's convenient, or like their presence is honored only when others are watching. You must teach your children that respect is not a reward, it's a constant, that honoring you is not about performance, it's about truth, and that your worth is not tied to your productivity, your wealth, or your compliance. If your child ever shows you respect only when they need something, whether it's money, approval, or emotional support, that behavior must be confronted, not excused, because every time you forgive it without change, you lose a piece of your self-worth, and in old age. Self-worth is the foundation of emotional survival. This chapter is a voice for every parent who has felt praised in public but dismissed in private, who has been thanked with words but ignored with actions, and who has wondered if their child's love is real or just convenient. It's a call to reclaim your dignity, to demand consistency, and to understand that being loved means being respected, not sometimes, not when needed, but always, because if you don't speak up today, tomorrow you may find yourself treated like a tool, a symbol, or a stepping stone, and the humiliation of that reality will be deeper than any wound, because it will be inflicted not by enemies, but by the very children you raised with love. So never forgive conditional respect, not for peace, not for pride, and not for appearances, because your dignity is not seasonal, it is sacred, and that sacredness must be protected with unwavering truth. There is a kind of guilt that doesn't come from doing something wrong. It comes from trying to protect yourself, from daring to set boundaries, and from saying no to the very children you raised with unconditional love. For many parents, especially in old age, this guilt becomes a silent prison, a place where they feel trapped between their own emotional needs and the fear of disappointing their children. This chapter explores the emotional torment of parents who feel guilty for asserting themselves, for refusing to give money they can't afford, for declining help they're too tired to offer, or for simply asking for space, peace, or respect. And when children react with anger, manipulation, or withdrawal, the parent begins to question their own right to say no, wondering if love means always saying yes, even when it hurts. And when parents forgive this reaction, telling themselves, I must have been too harsh, or I don't want to lose them, they unknowingly surrender their emotional autonomy, allowing guilt to replace dignity and fear to replace truth. But love that punishes boundaries is not love, it's control, and when children learn that their parents will always comply out of guilt, they begin to treat them not as individuals, but as emotional vending machines. Press the right button and get what you want. In old age, when your energy is limited and your emotional strength is fragile, The inability to say no becomes dangerous. It leads to burnout, resentment, and a slow erosion of self-worth, and no parent deserves to feel ashamed for protecting their peace, for honoring their limits, or for choosing themselves once in a while. You must teach your children that boundaries are not rejection, they are self-respect, that saying no is not cruelty, it's clarity, and that your love is not measured by how much you give, but by how honestly you live. If your child ever makes you feel guilty for saying no, whether through silence, sarcasm, or emotional withdrawal, that behavior must be confronted, not excused, because every time you forgive it without change, you lose a piece of your emotional freedom, and in old age, freedom is the breath that keeps your spirit alive. This chapter is a voice for every parent who has said yes when they wanted to say no, who has given more than they could afford, and who has stayed silent to avoid conflict. It's a call to reclaim your voice, to honor your limits, and to understand that being loved means being allowed to say no without fear. Because if you don't speak up today, tomorrow you may find yourself exhausted, depleted, and emotionally broken, and the humiliation of that reality will be deeper than any wound, because it will be inflicted not by strangers, but by the very children you raised with love. So never forgive guilt-based control, not for peace, not for pride, and not for family harmony, because your boundaries are not betrayal, they are survival, and that survival must be protected with unwavering courage. There is a kind of erasure that doesn't happen in history books. It happens in living rooms, in family conversations, and in the way children tell their stories without mentioning the parents who made those stories possible. For many parents, especially in old age, the pain of being forgotten is not about memory loss. It's about emotional exclusion, about watching their legacy be rewritten without them, and about hearing their name fade from the narrative of the very lives they helped shape. This chapter explores the heartbreak of being forgotten in your own story, when children speak of their success without acknowledging the sacrifices that built it, when they share family memories that exclude the parent's role, and when they reshape the past to suit their own image, leaving behind the truth of love, struggle, and devotion. And when parents forgive this rewriting, telling themselves, they're just expressing themselves, or, maybe I was too strict, they unknowingly allow their identity to be reshaped by someone else's lens, a lens that may be clouded by ego, resentment, or selective memory, but your story is not theirs to edit. It is yours to protect, to preserve, and to pass on with pride. In old age, when your memories become your most valuable possession, the distortion of those memories becomes a theft of dignity, of identity, and of emotional peace. And no parent should ever feel like a stranger in their own life, like a footnote in their child's success, or like a villain in a narrative they never wrote. You must teach your children that honoring you means honoring your truth, the good, the flawed, the painful, and the beautiful. If your child ever misrepresents your past, denies your sacrifices, or paints you in a light that erases your love, that behavior must be confronted, not excused, because every time you forgive it without clarity, you lose a piece of your legacy, and in old age, legacy is the bridge between your life and the generations to come. This chapter is a tribute to every parent who has been silenced, misquoted, or misunderstood. It's a call to reclaim your narrative, to speak your truth, and to demand that your story be told with honesty, respect, and depth. Because if you don't protect your legacy today, tomorrow you may find yourself remembered not for your love, but for your mistakes, not for your strength, but for your silence, and not for your sacrifices, but for the shadows others cast upon you. So, never forgive the rewriting of your history, not for peace, not for pride, and not for comfort, because your life is a testament, your journey is a lesson, and your legacy is a gift that must be preserved with unwavering truth. There is a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace. It comes from surrender, from years of being unheard, unseen, and unvalued. For many parents, especially in old age, This silence is not chosen. It's forced upon them by repeated emotional neglect, by unanswered calls, by cold responses, and by the slow realization that their voice no longer matters in the lives they once centered. This chapter explores the heartbreaking moment when parents stop asking for help, for love, for time, for respect, not because they don't need it, but because they've learned that asking leads to disappointment, to rejection, or to indifference. And when parents forgive this silence, telling themselves, "I don't want to bother them," or "they have their own lives," they unknowingly bury their own emotional needs, trading dignity for quiet and presence for invisibility. But silence that comes from pain is not noble, it's tragic. And when children mistake it for strength, they fail to see the wounds it hides, the tears it holds back, and the loneliness it amplifies. In old age, when your world shrinks and your heart longs for connection, the silence becomes suffocating. It wraps around your spirit like a fog, blurring your sense of worth, your desire to speak, and your hope to be heard. And no parent deserves to feel like a burden for expressing love, for asking for care, or for needing emotional warmth. You must teach your children that silence is not strength. It's a warning. That quietness is not peace, it's pain, and that when a parent stops asking, it's not because they're fine, it's because they've given up. If your child ever makes you feel like your needs are inconvenient, your emotions are excessive, or your presence is optional, that behavior must be confronted, not excused, because every time you forgive it without change, you lose a piece of your emotional voice, and in old age, your voice is the last thread that connects you to the world. This chapter is a tribute to every parent who has stopped asking, not because they don't care, but because they've been taught that caring is one-sided, that love is not returned, and that their existence is no longer central. It's a call to reclaim your voice, to speak even when it's hard, and to understand that being loved means being heard, not just in moments of crisis, but in the quiet, daily rhythms of life. Because if you don't break the silence today, tomorrow you may find yourself erased, not by death, but by neglect, not by absence, but by emotional abandonment, and the humiliation of that reality will be deeper than any wound, because it will be inflicted not by strangers, but by the very children you raised with love. So never forgive the silence that steals your voice, not for peace, not for pride, and not for comfort, because your voice is not noise, it is truth, and that truth must be protected with unwavering courage.